Hey everybody! The purpose of this video is to walk you through a solution to question 4.15.22 in the Collaborative Statistics textbook. This is about IRS audits. These are pretty popular in these textbooks, I've noticed. It says for a tax return with over $25,000 in income, the chance of an audit is about 2% per year. So I guess what that means is historically the feds audit 2% of those per year. And then this is kind of an important statement down here. Assume each year is independent. That's kind of a fictitious assumption, at least based on what I've heard. Somebody that gets audited might be audited with more probability than somebody who hasn't. But they're telling us to assume they're independent. So since they're assuming they're independent, we are going to check for a fixed 20-year period, and there is a given chance of 2% probability. Sounds to me like we got ourselves a binomial on our hands, because each year you either are or not audited. All right. So first off, the first question is, what random variable are we testing? Well, we're testing whether or not we get audits over 20 years. So the random variable would be the number of audits over a 20-year period. The values would therefore be from 0 to 20, because you could have no audits whatsoever, or you might have up to 20 audits and everywhere in between. Parts B and C require us to actually create the distribution, which I've done for you here by running distfill. So you got your distribution right here. You'll notice it's going to be very, very, very rare to get any more than a few audits per year, because on average you get 2%. So the most likely outcome, with almost 2/3 probability, 66.7%, 66.8%, is 0, because out of 20 years, 2% of 20 years rounds down to 0. And that's actually the first question: how many audits are expected in a 20-year period? Now, if you need more precision than what I just gave you, you can either, number one, run one var stats on L1 and L2 and get your 0.4 that way. Or you could simply realize, okay, 20 years, 2% of those 20 years I'm going to get audited, which means I'm going to get audited 0.4 times on average over 20 years. Now, of course, you're going to tell me that we can't be audited 0.4 times. You either are audited or you're not. And you're correct. You're correct in saying that. But on average, if we average all the people that have over $25,000 in income, their average number of audits is 0.4. So, Part E says, what's the chance they're not audited at all? Well, it's right there, roughly 2/3, 66.8% chance of not being audited at all. That means the remainder of the time, what would it be, 33.2% of the time, they're going to get audited once or more, or at least once. They didn't ask us for that probability, but I like that probability. So you got about a 1/3 this is essentially the same numbers as going to the chick store, buying 4 chicks. That would be the chance of having 0 roosters, which means there's about a 1/3 chance of getting a rooster somewhere. F, what's the chance they're audited more than twice? More than twice. Now, more than twice would be 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, up to 20. I think it would make more sense to look at what's the chance of being audited twice or less, which would be roughly 5% plus roughly 27%. So that right there is going to be about 32% plus 66. We're at about 98, 99%. So there's about a 99% chance you're going to get audited no more than twice. 99%. That means there's got to be a 1% chance of being audited more than twice. And this is where it gets interesting. How can you use that information? Well, suppose someone is audited more than twice over the course of a 20-year period. Well, that shouldn't happen, according to these numbers. When you get audited on an income of $25,000, you should be audited 0 once or at most twice in the realm of commonality. So if someone gets audited more than twice, especially if they get audited way more than twice, say 3, 4, or 5 times, you start questioning the assumption that the audits are independent, and start saying to yourself, I wonder if I'm being targeted. And this is how you can use probability to test a hypothesis. The hypothesis would be the years are independent, but if someone comes back with 5 audits in 20 years, you begin to wonder, I wonder if they're independent. And it starts to sound like they're not independent. So anyway, that's a little bit of a 244 answer to the question. I hope this helped you answer number 22.